experts, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you. I welcome you all to this high-level policy dialogue on water transversality and climate risk, adaptation, mitigation and resilience building, organized by India Water Foundation in partnership with Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet. Increasing climate extremes and variability, coupled with unsustainable growth and consumption, is leading to more severe and frequent water-related disasters and risks, worsening environmental degradation, including pollution, increasing water temperatures and ecosystem loss, and profoundly affecting economies, societies, and the environment. This in turn undermines the natural ability of ecosystems to combat both the causes and impacts of climate change. An increase in global warming is projected to exacerbate risks to ecosystems and humans. 9 out of 10 disasters triggered by natural hazards during the last decade were water-related. Due to their water-dependent nature, food security, human health, urban and rural settlements, energy production, industrial development, economic development and ecosystems are all at risks and are increasingly becoming vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. At the same time, responses to climate change also impact water resources and hydrological processes. The extent of water-related risk is growing at an unprecedented rate, and are the frequency, intensity and costs of disasters causing significant losses and damages to people, nature, economic assets and infrastructure. Adaptation strategies and resilience building is the priority discussion, but can we leave water out of it? Aren't climate disasters manifested through water? So what can we do? How do we bring water to the center of climate discussions? The session will explore how we need to rethink collaboration with our greatest allies in the climate crisis if we are going to achieve climate and water resilience for all. For this policy dialogue, I have a very eminent panel of speakers in front of me, and to initiate the same, I first request Dr. Arvind Kumar, President, India Water Foundation, to give us all an overview of this policy dialogue. Dr. Kumar, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudha. Mr. Satya Tripathi, Secretary General, Gas. Mr. David Cooper, Acting Executive Secretary, CBD. Mr. Bruno, Deputy Director, UNEP, will be coming later. So Mr. Eddie Moore, Director, IHE, Delft. Mr. Eric Trudeau, Vice President and my colleague, World Water Council. And Mr. Thomas Ravermark, Director, Swedish Water House, International Process. Mr. Anthony Magma, Manager of the Sustain 2 Program, IUCN. Mr. Hitesh Vaid, Chief Technical Advisor, IWF, and other dignitaries. Good afternoon to all of you, and as President of India Water Foundation, I welcome you to this high-level political dialogue at COP28. We have all assembled here to intervene and deliberate on the most pressing challenge of the current times, climate change. It has been confirmed by the latest WMO report that 2023 held shattered climate records, accompanied by the extreme weather which had left a trail of devastation and despair, and July was the hottest on the record of any month, around 1.5 degrees warmer than the pre-industrial times. I was in Geneva in September at the 50th session of the UNHRC, and I could see the effects of the early flowering and the sweltering afternoon, not just that, but floods in Asia and the South America and forest fires in the Canada and USA are some devastating disasters happening due to rising temperatures and disturbing weather patterns, and most important, the disturbed water cycle. Water is the primarily medium through which climate change influences the Earth's ecosystem and therefore people's livelihoods and well-being. As projections suggested that more torrential rain, floods and droughts can be expected in many areas, changing precipitation patterns are shifting rainy season as a development connector, and as an economic indicator, it is a catalyst that links social, economic, and environmental SDGs, and is a gateway of bridging the gaps between the socio-economic and environmental pillars of sustainable development. Water is needed across all the sectors to produce food, produce energy, combat climate change, provide healthy ecosystems, and more. But with growing demands for water and mounting pressure from the linked sectors, water resources are severely stressed, reducing the adverse consequences and cost of the climate change, and tapping into any opportunity will require adaptation. Adaptation is not about maintaining the status quo at all costs. It is about adjusting to new circumstances in order to reduce adverse effects and minimize costs and seize any potential opportunities. Adaptation to climate change is mainly about better water management, recognizing this and responding to it appropriately present development opportunities. Appropriate adaptation measures build upon known land and water management practices to foster resilience to future climate change. Therefore, enhanced water security, innovative technologies, and integrated solutions are needed at appropriate scales for adaptation as well as mitigation. It is imperative for the government to recognize the pivotal role of water in adapting to climate change in order to increase resilience, mitigate climate impacts, and eventually achieve sustainable development. Consequently, to raise environment resilience and sustain human well-being, we need to overhaul the policy-making process towards a holistic approach of transversality. Water, energy, and agri-food, environmental and waste sectors cannot be seen in silos. Well-designed plans should be customized as per the contemporary need in an integrated manner, incorporating transversality approach while interlinking vertical linkages between water, food, energy nexus, and ecosystem-based adaptation approach with horizontal linkages like health, education, agriculture, gender, etc. And they must be weighed against efficiency, effectiveness, and equity. The water transversality approach heightens the interdependence of water, energy, food security, agriculture, and ecosystem, water, soil, and land that underpin that security. This approach identifies mutually beneficial responses that are based on understanding the synergies of water and related sector policies. It is also provide an informed and transparent framework for determining the proper trade-offs and synergies that maintain the integrity and sustainability of the ecosystems. The recognition of loss and damage funds on the first of the COP28 has given all of us hope for better to come. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Kumar, for giving us insights into this policy dialogue. Our first speaker this afternoon is Dr. David Cooper, Acting Executive Director of the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. He has more than 30 years of experience in environmental and agricultural science and policy and international negotiations, including more than 20 years with the CBD. Dr. Cooper, please.
Thank you very excuse me. Thank you very much, Shweta, and Dr. Kumar, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'd like to thank the India Water Foundation for hosting this event to highlight the critical role of water and its linkages to the climate crisis, and I'm going to also talk about the linkages to the biodiversity crisis. It's self-evident that water is a vital resource for humanity, and in fact, today is World Soil Day. The theme this year for World Soil Day is soil and water as source for life, and this perhaps embodies this central point. But of course, here in Dubai, we have key on the agenda this global stocktaker progress towards the goals of the Paris Agreement. And it's clear that we have to step up actions. We have the remaining years of this decade to take urgent actions to reduce emissions if we're going to stay within 1.5 degrees and prevent the worst impacts of climate change. But as Dr. Kumar, you've already acknowledged, we are already seeing impacts of climate change. As you mentioned, many of these are actually mediated through the water cycle. Storms, floods, droughts, and water shortages. All of these with huge impacts that damage livelihoods, that compromise food security. They're all dependent on the water cycle. And in turn, the water cycle depends on water-related ecosystems and biodiversity. And in fact, these storms and floods and droughts, they're not only an impact of climate change. Of course, with climate change, yes, we're seeing more higher frequency and higher intensity of these extreme events. But they're also exacerbated by ecosystem degradation, the destruction of wetlands, deforestation, destruction of floodplains, engineering of rivers and the overuse of water. An additional threat, of course, to water is pollution. And what we're seeing really is the outcomes of multiple crises interacting in a downward spiral that threatens our own security and threatens sustainability on this planet. Again, looking at water, freshwater biodiversity is the most threatened of all biodiversity. Losses in the abundance of freshwater organisms since 1970 are twice as large as those on land or in the sea. So the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, the water crisis, in fact, they're different facets of one crisis. They must be addressed as such. They must be addressed together. They must be addressed by everyone, and they must be addressed now. We have just the remaining years of this decade to act. With the adoption in Montreal just short of a year ago, at COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity, we had the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and this charts a clear and ambitious path to halt the loss of biodiversity, and by 2030 put nature on a path to recovery for the benefit of people and the planet. Together with the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, therefore we have the pathway, we have the plan for reversing this downward spiral and to create a virtuous cycle. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework has 23 targets. All of them are relevant to water. I'll highlight just a few. The first 3 targets focus on managing land, on planning, on restoring ecosystems, and on protecting critical ecosystems, and of course this includes water-related ecosystems, including the targets of restoring 30% of degraded ecosystems and conserving 30% of lands and seas in underprotected areas. Target 6 focuses on reducing the impacts of invasive alien species, which is another major threat to biodiversity in water, but also often to waterways and water systems themselves. And also we have target 7 focusing on reducing pollution, and key among some of those pollution targets is reducing the overuse and misuse of nutrients and pesticides, which often affect in particular waterways. Implementation of this framework must involve a whole of society approach. It involves action across all government departments, all sectors of the government. It's yes, transversal. I want to recognise the creation of the new ministry in India, Jal Shakti, which brings really an integrated approach to the management of water. I think very much in tune with the theme that we saw at the UN Water Week at the beginning of the year. I also want to highlight one other key element of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and that is the human rights-based approach, including recognition of the human right to a clean and healthy environment. And clearly this is also central to how we look at the water issue as well. So we have the framework adopted just under a year ago. Countries are now busy translating those global targets into national targets and developing their national biodiversity strategies, updated national biodiversity strategies to do so. That's a big opportunity to make sure that they're well integrated with water issues and that water issues are well integrated into the NBSAPs. And of course, we're also looking at this conference here to have a clear recommendation that biodiversity, that NBSAPs are linked to the NDCs, and that in the ramping up of the nationally determined contributions, which it's critically clear that is needed. So this increased ambition that we will need to see in the NDCs over the coming few years, they must also take into account biodiversity issues as well as water issues. We need to accelerate progress, accelerate action on all of these issues, but working together we can, I think, achieve all of the SDGs, achieve the goals and targets of the Kunming-Montreal framework, and address the UN water agenda as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper, for very importantly walking us through the linkage between water and biodiversity, especially the freshwater ecosystems that you've spoken about and the biodiversity framework. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Dr. Satya Tripathi, Secretary General, Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet. He's a development economist, lawyer and changemaker with over 40 years of varied experience. He served with the UN for more than 2 decades in key positions and was most recently the UN Assistant Secretary General, head of the New York office at UN Environment and Secretary of the UN Environment Management Group. Mr. Tripathi, please.
Thank you. Well, we've heard from my good friend David about how important it is to keep the local and the national frameworks in mind. In terms of the Kunming-Montreal framework, the National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plans that all countries have, and of course in the context of this topic that's happening here. But you know, what worries me is that in the context of even countries like India that have strategic depth in terms of analysis, data gathering, it has a long history of statistical excellence in terms of gathering data right down to the village level and all. But you know, the challenge is lost in translation. I'm not sure it's intended, but that's the reality. Let me explain. Yesterday we had a big event here hosted by one of the members of the Global Alliance, the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICIMOD, which is an 8-country intergovernmental organization. They recently published a study, and that, as compared to 2010, the Himalayan glaciers are melting 65% faster. Now what is that? That's just a little data point, you know? Oh, the glaciers are melting faster. What exactly do they do? That's the Hindu Kush Himalayas cryosphere, as it is known as, actually provides water for 2 billion people. In Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, China, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh and Myanmar. So if you are thinking policy and this doesn't worry us, and why is it happening? Of course, there are 100 different reasons. It's an interplay of many factors, global warming being one of the primary reasons, of course. But also, in North India, when we burn down the crop residue and the shoots, you know, the suspended particulate matter that rises up in the air, it settles along the Hindu Kush Himalayas as what is known as the Asian brown cloud, ABC. So snow actually reflects or radiates back what it gets with 100% efficiency. The moment you put a black nucleoride on top of it, it catches the heat. And that's catastrophic actually. You can't, no matter what words I use, what adjectives I use, cannot really capture the catastrophic impact of the Hindu Kush Himalayas glaciers melting down. So when we're talking about policy and we're looking at, okay, you know, this is a little landscape level issue, or this is a watershed issue, or I need to bring back the ponds and the river streams, we are not talking about the elephant in the room. The same way we're not talking about the elephant in the room with climate change. And so that is why, and water is at the heart of everything. We keep talking about energy transition. Without energy, there will be no water supply to most of the population, unless you live right next to a river, and that also will be killed because the rivers are so polluted, you can't pick up a pot of water and consume it without having to you know, heat it or boil it or sterilize it or whatever it is you do to stay safe. So that's the challenge. And whatever we do, we really have to think in terms of the broader landscape at a system scale, and what can we do. That's why I was telling Dr. Kumar, just we were having a bilateral conversation. I was telling him that let's convene all the water champions in India. Let's have a conversation about this. Because once that melts down, all these mighty river systems that we talk about, the Ganges, the Yamuna, and all the other rivers, that the tributaries and the distributaries, they'll all die. In best case, they'll have water during the rainy seasons. That's not enough. So that's why we really need to think system scale. And to David's point, we really need to look at these frameworks because they have been thought through. There's a lot of thinking that has gone into them. It's not just numbers. They're not just ideas on paper. They actually can help countries and communities. So by following those well-researched, well-discussed, well-debated and well-negotiated and well-articulated frameworks, there's wisdom in there, and to the extent that we don't use them, it's our loss. And we've seen that. I was in Nagoya in 2010 when we were discussing a different protocol and different targets. We achieved nothing. The writing is on the wall. We've lost that opportunity. This is a much bigger and a much more challenging opportunity. Challenging because we have to do the right things on the face of mounting catastrophes on every shore. There's floods, there's storm surges, and you know, as I often say, yes, we all can't do the same thing. We are all in the same storm, but we are in different boats. So each one has to really look at what resources we have, what are our challenges, what are our opportunities, what can I do by myself, where do I need to find a helping hand. Instead of pointing fingers at each other, no? You did this and I did this, that hasn't really taken us anywhere in the 30 years we have been negotiating. We really have to embrace the problem for what it is, come together as a community, whether as a local community, a national community, or as a global community, and then find the resources. No, that is exactly why 3 days ago we signed an agreement with Federated Hermes, which is a $715 billion asset manager. Why did we sign that agreement? Because we want to do things at system scale, and we needed a partner that doesn't talk millions, which doesn't work in India. And so we want to create ideas, support ideas that are actually capable of producing system scale impact. So those of you in the audience or in the panel, if you have ideas, but the first thing we are doing, we hope to announce the new institution, the World Climate and Nature Guarantee Facility, and the ambition is to disburse $100 billion in first loss guarantees in the next 15 years. This is not a government conversation. We're working with governments. I'm very grateful that the Scottish Premier was here to lend his strong support, and we're discussing with the Scottish government as to how they can lend a helping hand. And why I was inspired by them is that when the Loss and Damage Fund was agreed on in Glasgow, the first jurisdiction to put money into that fund was Scotland. They put in £2 million. And see, that ambition has taken root now. It's at $500 million right now, and it's growing. So when the Scottish First Minister was talking about how proud he was that his predecessor put that money in there, and that it has grown into what it is today. So, and I had a bilateral with him separately, and I was telling him that, it's amazing that the first mover, especially if it's a government that respects nature, because if you have ever been to Scotland, you would know it's a phenomenal country in terms of how they are protected Mother Nature and the respect they show. And they are also the home of sustainable finance. Long before anybody talked about sustainable finance, Scotland was the home of sustainable finance. And so they are a big partner, and I'm glad that they're offering us that support, and we're working towards working with them. And on day one, we want to, when we open the doors of that institution in 6 months, we will have $1 billion regenerative agriculture lending facility up and running. So it's not tall promises and small delivery. We will walk the talk, as I was telling when I was speaking at the partnership launch. I said no tall promises here, just that we will work relentlessly and will produce results that speak for themselves. That's basically what it is. But on water, without water we are all lost. So I'm desperately looking for ideas and possibilities where we're not lost in translation and intergovernmental conversations. That must happen, that is necessary, but that's a parallel track. We must need to imagine possibilities and keep delivering results at system scale while that conversation, as important as it is, it's a different dynamic. They will not agree on something overnight because there's a lot of countries, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of history, and a lot of blame going around. But we, the citizens of the world that care about our planet and the future of our families and our children and our friends and our communities, we need to come together and act without pointing fingers at anybody and just identifying opportunities, finding the champions, incubating ideas, and replicating success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tripathi. Now definitely we have to walk the talk, and there's been a lot of rhetoric, but now actions are needed, and we have lost several opportunities. We cannot lose this one. So now my next speaker is Mr. Eric Tardu, Vice President, World Water Council since 2017. He has been Director General of the International Office for Water, an association that aims to develop skills to better manage water in France and worldwide. And since 2018, he has been Secretary General of the International Network of Basin Organizations. So Mr. Eric Tardu's message is in form of a video that we have.
I know. I was thinking like someone changed his name. I said that's interesting. He sat down and he changed his name.
It is a pivotal moment for me to address you. Water is the first victim of climate change, and we will say the word community. Water is all life, is something that connects us all. But this is a challenge that needs a united approach. Climate change is proving unusual weather, driving sea levels and extreme events, which are a big threat to our water. Think, for example, about the Himalayas, often called the water tower of Asia. The glaciers there, which provide water to over a billion people, are melting fast due to rising temperatures. This is causing problems like too much water in rivers during the rainy season, leading to floods. At the same time, it's creating a shortage of water for millions during the dry seasons. This situation, among many others, shows how closely linked climate change, water availability, and people's lives are. The frequency of extreme events has clearly increased, and uncertainty has become the key aspect of adaptation and resilience. What do we need to adapt to? How can we design water-related infrastructures? How do we need to build cities? How can we protect most vulnerable communities? How do we need to reorient food production? Adaptation, mitigation, and resilience building are all connected, and they require that we work together. As the availability of resources is becoming more difficult, many already existing tools are becoming more relevant than ever. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Planning is key, based on increased and shared scientific knowledge over the climate scenarios and their local consequences, based on stronger data sharing processes and smarter water information systems, based on reinforced dialogue between water producers and local communities, interlinking regional, national, and local functions, based on effective governance tools, because this is the key toward adaptation and resilience. We also need to integrate water nature holistically, since there is no water security without ecological security, and there is no ecological security without water security. This is a strong conviction that the World Wide Council shares with its partners of our Water and Nature Action Plan, launched during last March's UN Water Conference in New York, together with the Nature Conservancy and ISRO. The conviction that is at the heart of both adaptation, risk reduction, and resilience action, including, for example, through the dissemination of nature-based solutions with innovative business models in order to tackle both water and nature issues. Building adaptation and resilience and mitigation on these tools, among others, of course, will create a strong shield against the uncertainties of climate change. To sum it up, dealing with climate change is at the very purpose of water security concerns and needs our attention now, and it requires us to work together. The decisions taken from today will impact those we name in now the 10th Global Forum, sharing how we can better take care of the water and handle climate change on a global level. Water for life, and by committing sustainable management, we're giving a gift not just to ourselves, but to the generations that will follow. Thank you very much for the invitation, and let's continue together this journey towards the future, where water is secure and where we are risking the challenges of climate change.
I thank our partner World Water Council for this wonderful message that they have sent. Our next speaker is Mr. Thomas Rebermark. I apologize if I have pronounced it incorrectly. To share his insights, Mr. Rebermark is Director, Swedish Waterhouse International Process from Stockholm International Water Institute, a water and value chain champion with 30+ years sea-level experience in business development, partnerships and stakeholder engagements. He sits on the election board of UN Global Compact Network Sweden and is a board member of IWS Sweden as well. Mr. Thomas, please.
Thank you, and dear and distinguished panelists and dear water friends, if I may say so, in this context. The process. So, for us as a water governance institute, working with strategies, supporting nations and communities and regions and on all levels with methods and toolkits and strategies, I would say that water underpins the achievement of every SDG, as we've heard already before. We can't meet any of the SDGs without water, and we need to make sure that the water is part of every climate-related decision. I must say, though, that not necessarily in the forefront of everything, because water is not the number one in every case, but recognized for its crucial role in climate action, adaptation and mitigation. So this in all sectors, not only in the sectors, but also in between and cross-sectoral decisions. So to make sure that the stakeholders from outside the water sector are aware of that and do not take water availability for granted in their development in climate planning, and that is so essential. So if we look into the water ecosystems and nature incentivized, especially on how to build climate resilience, I would say that very concretely, forests can effectively store carbon. They can limit erosions of riverbanks, improve water quality and reduce disaster risk by slowing rivers and flooding and preventing landslides. They can also influence local climate by regulating precipitation and temperature. Wetlands, including peatlands, coastal marshes and seagrass beds, accommodate the largest carbon stocks among all ecosystems and store twice as much carbon as forests. So enhanced rain-fed agriculture, such as deep bed farming and other forms of regenerative farming, can contribute to climate change, mitigation and adaptation. These solutions need to be considered as part of a broader holistic planning processes, and especially need to be financed. So the finance mechanism that we heard about earlier is one of the crucial and last remaining issues that we need to solve, because I think we have the solutions, but we need the financing mechanisms. So how crucial is integration of water in climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction and biodiversity protection? Well, I would say that an estimated 90% of adaptation is water related, and over 90% of the natural disasters are water related. So including drought and aridification, wildfires, pollution and flood, without water there is no biodiversity, and as we heard, the vice versa as well. So climate adaptation and mitigation can only be effective if approached holistically, such as through source-to-sea management and other nexuses. This means the bridging of scientific, institutional and legislative silos across all sectors and borders and the entire water cycle. So since holistic approaches offer multi-solutions, simultaneously addressing sustainable development, disaster risk reduction, environmental protection and biodiversity objectives. So if we want to advance further on this topic, we need to take action and commit as needed. And countries have an enormous responsibility through the national determined contributions to place water security at the heart of the climate priorities. The principles of good and resilient water governance and cooperation over shared resources is necessary for achieving water and climate security in all various social, economic, political and environmental dimensions. But having the means to implement those plans remains challenging, especially to development countries. So recognizing that many national commitments are implemented through local institution and community efforts, and that these should be accounted for and incorporated within national processes. So in addition to that, to be effective, climate strategies must be inclusive. They must be paying particular attention to include those who are the most affected by the strategies and decisions, and they need to call on governments at all levels to commit to holistic management of the water cycle. Considering the linkage between land, freshwater, coastal and marine ecosystems, health and equality in investments, institutions, policies and practice. We all need to improve the availability and accessibility of information and knowledge, including local and indigenous people's knowledge about climate impacts on specific water systems for improved decision making. So, empowering means that we empower women, youth and underrepresented populations who are more vulnerable to the climate change and disaster and severely disadvantaged in relation to land and water tenure, finance, information and communication technologies and education. Implement processes to ensure that investments in the protection, conservation and restoration of water systems and water-related ecosystems result in just climate resilience and in line with the outcomes of the UNFCCC COP27 and its cover decision, the Sharm el-Sheikh Implementation Plan. So, recognizing that sound water resources management and service provisions are prerequisites for the achievement of all global frameworks and initiatives and investments in them accordingly. So with that, I will hand over.
Thank you, Thomas, for your comments and pointing out the vital role that forests and water play in carbon absorption and all the important things that you have mentioned later. So Dr. David Cooper has to actually leave. So any parting comments before leaving? The last comments from you?
Really, I think it's been said by the other panelists too, the centrality of water for the climate crisis, but also for biodiversity, and the fact that we've really got to look at these issues together. We need a whole of government approach, a whole of society approach in addressing these crises because they're so closely interrelated. And apologies for having to leave, but
no, we understand. And I would request Dr. Kumar to please present his book to Mr. Cooper.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Apologies. Sorry. Jerry, thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Dr. Eddie Moores, Rector, IIT Delft Institute of Water Education, and his is also a recorded message. Professor Moores was head of the research team Climate Change and Adaptive Land and Water Management at Wageningen Environmental Research. He's also Professor of Water and Climate at the VU University, Amsterdam. And the video, please. The video. Thank you.
My name is Eddie Moores, I'm Rector of IIT Delft. I would like to discuss a little bit with you the issue of climate change and water. And as we all know, climate change is not going to stop. It will continue for some time. On this slide, what you will see is the global carbon budget for 2021 and 2022. What we see is, although there is a reduction of the increase of the carbon equivalent emissions, the emissions are still continuing. Fortunately, in some countries, the emissions have been reduced, but we need this continuous commitment actually from all countries to make sure that we don't reach at a carbon dioxide level, and with that temperature increase that are unsustainable for human beings, especially the way we're living at the moment, and how we can continue living in that way, or even improving our quality of life. So one of the things that I would like to discuss today with you is specifically focusing on agriculture and ecological droughts. What you see in this particular picture is actually on the column on your left-hand side is the situation that were there in the past. And if you go to the next column, you see the present, so the today situation. And then further to the right, you see the temperature increase, 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees Celsius. and 4 degrees Celsius. Within those pictures, you see actually the increase in the number of droughts that are taking place, but not only the increase in the number of droughts, but what you also see is the extent of the drought is increasing, meaning that you will have more droughts, but those droughts will become more severe. That indicates that water shortages, as we're facing already in some of the cities in the past, like we see in California, but also in Cape Town, we see it in Montevideo, and we see that happening in Monterrey, in Mexico. So in all those places, all over the world, you see that those droughts are increasing. You see the impact directly in the urban areas, but you also see that in the rural areas. In the rural areas, it's especially agriculture and the nature that are being hardest hit by those droughts. So what can we do about that, and how can we prepare ourselves for those droughts that are taking place? Now, before I go into what potential actions and possibilities we have, another thing that I think is something that concern. In a lot of cases, to overcome a drought, especially in the rural areas and or also in the urban areas, we tend to switch from surface water, rainfall, river flow. We tend to switch to the use of groundwater systems. But what's happening in the moment is that actually the exploitation of those water resources is not well regulated in a lot of cases, and the needs are so big that what you see is that you see an enormous drop in groundwater level. In this graph you see a picture of California, but you may know that also in countries like Nepal, in countries like Mexico, but also in other countries, you see a drop of the groundwater level that goes as far as 3 to 4 meters a year. Which means that by this drop, you are also creating inequity. Because in a lot of cases, for example, nature, but also smallholder farmers will not have access to those deep groundwater systems. But the bigger farmers, they do have, or the industrial use of groundwater is going to those deeper levels. So by this extraction of groundwater and this over-exploitation, we're not only causing a problem with the maintenance of our agriculture and nature, but we're also causing a bigger inequity between the people that are using those groundwater systems. So if you then look at the big picture that's coming forward also from the SDG 6, so that's the SDG that is related to water in the broad sense, you will see numbers like this. I will not go into details of all of them, but the one that I would like to ask your attention for today is the one on the right hand side with the number 21. That is, say, the SDG indicator that tells us something a little bit about surface area change in water surfaces. So that means that this 21% tells us that in the last years, 21% of the water surface area has been changed. Now, interesting, of course, is then to know in what direction has that change been made. This is coming from UNEP. It tells us a little bit about the ecosystem health and the wetlands, and what you see in there, that this 21% change in water surface area is mainly a shrinking of the wetland areas, including lakes. What you also see in this graph is actually that the value of those wetlands is enormous. It's twice the total value of the economy of the United States. So there's a lot of value in there, but still this value is underestimated in a lot of cases. We do know that also these wetlands can, for example, provide carbon sequestration, but they can also help in treating, say, water effluents, and it can help in uptaking some of the floods that you're experiencing. So that explains why those wetlands have such a big value in there. So we do think that if we want to change that, we do need some actions and commitments coming both from the national but also from the international level. And I do hope that at this meeting on 28 in Dubai, that we can come to some sort of agreement, some steps in a certain direction. And I would like to discuss with you a couple of those potential steps that we can make. First, in 2020, the Secretary General of the United Nations already indicated that water is key for most of the SDGs. And to proceed with those SDGs, we need to take a step in the water sector. then what was stated there is we need an accelerator. So here in this graph you see the accelerator framework that was proposed. And I think what I would like you to remember from this picture is actually that we can't, by just having investment, solve the problem. We need actually this combined effort, both on financing, on data and information, on governance, on innovations, and on capacity developments. Financing, of course, is a very important part, but if we just have financing, we create infrastructure, we also need capacity to maintain and operate this infrastructure. So we need those other parts in there as well. An important possibility that we do have is by valuing water in a better way. So if we look at the water, energy, food and environmental nexus, we can think about creating a structure in which we value, for example, the water we use, we value the energy that we use, we value the food that we produce, and we value the environment that we have. By putting all those four next to one another, we can make a management decision about which options we should look at. Often that can be a short-term decision that needs to be made, but I would really like to recommend that you use this system also for this long-term action, so that it can help you to make a decision on where you want to invest in to ensure that with all those four items on the table, we make the right decision to ensure that we increase the quality of life. Important to remember is the energy that is required, the economic value that is there, and the trade-offs that may take place. Another one is nature-based solutions, and we've been working on those nature-based solutions already for a long time. The country where I'm coming from, the Netherlands, we've been looking at how we can use nature-based solutions to create room for the river, or how we can use nature-based solutions to strengthen actually the coastal zones without actually influencing the environment in a way that there is no return. So there are a number of those solutions that may take place, and I think an important additional part in there is lake management. Lake management is sometimes overseen, but lake management and wetlands are very strongly related to one another, and if we can recommend some actions that could take place, those are building capacity on monitoring and management. So that means that you have to train, you have to give facilities to enable such an effort. Secondly, to embed lake management into national policies, because if it's not part of the national policy, then it may happen that through spatial planning or outskirts of cities, or the need for a harbor, the value of a nature reserve or a lake or wetlands can be lost. Another important part is that we need finance. So fostering green finance partnerships are also an important part to enable actually this protection and also the restoration of lakes and wetlands. And the last one that I would like to bring to your attention is to raise global awareness of the benefits of such a change. And global awareness is something that we can do here in Dubai during these days of the COP, but I do think that it's also important to continue doing that also later on, outside of these important conferences that were there, but also approach the media, look at national possibilities, national policies that are there, engage with young people, engage with schools, that we make aware of everybody using it, what the value of such a restoration may be. And by doing that, hopefully, that we can also improve the quality of life that I think is very strongly linked to the benefits of nature-based solutions, lakes and nature in general. Capacity development can help in doing that. So here's just one example on a course that we provide also at IHE Delft. It's a course that helps you to evaluate what the benefits are of a nature reserve. And that way you can compare that. In this case, it's an example of urbanization that is taking place somewhere. What are the benefits of construction a built-up area compared to the value that is there in the nature? And how can you then combine it, and how can you make the right decision to ensure that you don't lose the nature values that you have compared to the value that you may gain by increasing the area of the city. So those sort of capacity, I think, is really needed, and I would really recommend that we also push, besides for the financial side and the governance side and the data and innovation side, also for the capacity development side, to enable people to take part and be part of such a change. Thank you for your attention, and I do hope that you will have a very successful discussion, but also a very successful conference in here, and that we get the outcomes that we're looking for and the commitments that we really strongly need, both from national level, but also from the international level, as well as for the individual level. I hope to speak to you in Dubai.
We thank our partner IG Dev for their video. Thank you so much. Now Ms. Tripathi has to leave for another session, so Dr. Kumar will be presenting.
I'm really sorry.
Our next speaker is Mr. Anthony Magama. He is a Sustainable Agriculture Lead and Sustained Program Manager at the International Union for Conservation of Nature in Tanzania, with over 15 years of progressive experience working with sustainable agricultural sector development strategies, ecosystem management and organizational development. Thank you. Mr. Magama, please.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be part of this discussion this afternoon, and I think my former colleagues have put a very good basis, and also especially an emphasis of how water is central to a number of solutions that we are looking for, especially when it comes to climate change, adaptation, mitigation, as well as building resilience, especially of those categories who are most vulnerable. And here I do refer to communities, smallholder farmers, and allies, which are actually the most vulnerable when it comes to climate change. What I will add, especially is how to ensure now water is a lever for the transformation that we are looking at, is especially the need to look at the transboundary waters. I think, for example, in the case of Africa, where I come from, overall we have abundant water. So the issue is some of the areas are actually water stressed because of the reason that the distribution and also the fact that there could be enough water in some areas and less water in the other areas. So I think going forward, it's very important and key, if we are to consider that water plays its role, then we need to consider the transboundary fact, and also design and also engage with countries, especially who are sharing the water resources, so that those who are on the disadvantaged side can also benefit from the water resources. The other area is, it has already been mentioned about wastewater, but I wanted to mention about water circularity. That how do we position water in the circular economy, and especially developing water-based business models, wastewater recycling, agricultural waste management within the water ecosystem, because again that has got an impact when it comes to the role of water in climate adaptation and mitigation. And I was also trying to see what could be the possibilities now going forward, especially how do we incentivize water ecosystems and nature in order to build resilience. And here I wanted to touch a bit on the work that is being done in Africa. IUCN is working with some communities, building collaborative approaches, because most often water resources planning has been top down, and we have missed a bit because there is no water stewardship when it comes to many water users. So we are trying to build this collaborative management to move from the conventional top-down approach and to ensure that communities are part of it. But again, it comes to the question of benefit sharing models that we can also actually put in place, especially for those areas which are, for example, the water catchments, upstream and downstream water relations, and how are we really fostering the benefit sharing models so that those upstream where there is water source can actually be incentivized, can be motivated to really take care of the water resources. Another critical area which we also see it's essential is especially around water quality management. What tools, what solutions, what technologies can we deploy at the local level so that communities are also part of the water management, water quality check processes so as to maintain the credibility and also integrity of the water ecosystems. So we are trying to deploy what we call mainstream assessment and scoring, which is actually a very simple biomonitoring technology or solution that is implemented by the water users, by the communities, to be able to track and monitor river health, for example, the river biodiversity over time, and also take actions to correct and also improve the river health. So those are some of the actions at the local level which can contribute to inclusivity within the water management, as well as contributing to the broader adaptation that can result from the integrated water management. The last area which has already been also mentioned widely is around the nature-based solutions. So we are conducting joint assessment and also prioritizing the possible nature-based solutions that can be deployed to the communities, especially those which will foster actions to sustainably manage water resources. And for this, I wanted also to mention that IUCN is actually championing what we call the IUCN Nature-Based Solutions Standard, which provides criteria on how different partners and communities can actually use the standard when they design programs, when they monitor their own projects, to see how do they really contribute to nature-based solutions. Because again, 30% of the biodiversity challenges can actually be addressed through implementation of the nature-based solutions. So these are actually very critical when it comes to addressing the climate crisis through water resources. So those are some of the reflections that I wanted to share, and I hope we will keep engaging, and also from the participants at a later stage. But for now, thank you, and really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for your comments, and especially walking us through how this climate change and water scarcity is affecting the vulnerable communities, and how we should design and engage with countries which are transboundary and sharing waters with each other. Thank you so much. Our final speaker for this policy dialogue is Mr. Hitesh Vaidya, Chief Technical Advisor of India Water Foundation. Prior to this, he was Director, National Institute of Urban Affairs of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, Government of India. He has more than 25 years of broad-based experience on policy, project formulation, implementation, and program management. Prior to joining NEWA, he was holding the position of Country Representative of UN Habitat India. Mr. Vaidya, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, India Water Foundation. Thank you, all the dignitaries who spoke. I think all the issues have been spoken. I will just talk about, I'll take to your constituency, which is the contributor, as well as a sufferer because of water issues, and that is urban community. India just concluded G20 presidency, and one of the engagement group was Urban 20, and 105 cities really endorsed the issue, what they want in water security. So I'm just going to talk about the voice of 105 cities on water issues, and it's all their thoughts, not my thoughts. So it's about how they came together as a group of Urban 20 and talked about what they want to do. And my previous speakers talked about aspirations to actions. I think this is the action the city leaders wanted. And first action they talked about is it's a time to reimagine the role of water manager at a city level, because water cannot be looked at only as an engineer solution. It has to be a social solution, it has to be economical solution. So restart thinking about what type of water manager who will do. We all talk about big aspiration, but it is the who has to put pen to the paper, and that pen to paper has to be a transversality person rather than a single engineering solution to the water. Second thing we talked about is if cities have to be the looking at water issues, then how do they integrate water management into the planning instrument, which is a master plan? And that's the only legal instrument cities have. So integrated water management and master plan has to talk about same language, because one is an engineering language. Planning does not talk about water, water does not talk about planning. We all talk about green blue infrastructure, but it will not happen green blue if green does not talk to blue and blue does not talk to green. So that's the second thing. Third thing I think the previous speakers have all talked about is data. I think data is the key ingredient if you really want the kettle to boil the water, because unless you have a stringent data on which you can bring people together, collaborate and make a roadmap, nothing will happen. So how do you strengthen the data ecosystem at a city level? And that's the challenge, because I just did a master plan of Delhi recently, and I'll tell you, there was no data. There's all talks, but no data on which you can substantiate your planning findings. I think my previous speaker talked about nature-based solutions. Again, it's become a big jargon. How do you integrate nature-based solution within the water system? What type of standards we really need to? Everything under the sky can be a nature-based solution. But what do you mean by nature-based solution? And how do you procure those solutions? Because within the engineering, getting the new innovative ideas and integrating it within the project has a procurement challenges. How do you address that? That needs to be talked about. Second, last couple of more things, but just I don't want to take much time, is cities do not have a human capital. In India, there are not people to plan about the cities. Every city has, in India, if I count 50,000 people, there's one plan. So if that is the human capital we have at a city level, and we want this climate issue to be addressed, they will not be addressed. So I think that's the big challenge. And second thing which I particularly feel, and that's personal to me, is right now when we are talking about transversality, climate change, adaptation, mitigation, that's not the language of cities. Cities language has to be, climate language has to be a language of cities if you really want to address climate issues at the local level. I don't want to talk about, because all previous speakers have talked about it, is finance. Every time it's the finance which gives it. Your right hand side of menu need to talk to the left hand side of menu, because your right and left hand doesn't talk to each other. You will walk out of the restaurant without ordering anything. So that's the another. Partnerships, I think nobody has an answer. To all of us are really struggling on climate issues. And if I take you back to the Indian mythology, and when we had this battle of Mahabharata, where Lord Krishna came and gave the discourse on thing, there was something who can talk to you. What should we do? Right now we don't have anything. We have to write our own data, because that's all we have to do. And that's what I particularly feel. Aggregation of minds will be much more required now than the segregation of waste which we are thinking about. So that's where we should be really talking about. And circularity, I think that's a missing word in all of, nobody's talking about circularity, and you did bring the circularity. I'm so happy to think, because unless you want to have a water as a resource, circularity has to come back on the table of discussion and then. So summarizing that these 7 points or 8 points which the city leaders talked about, I think the policy need to talk to instruments has to come to practice, and that uniformity in a speech, in a mind and in action will actually resolve the water crisis which we are talking about for the future generation, because we have done it. We are now talking about net zero 2070 climate issue, as if that till from today to 2070 nothing will happen. We have to talk today, and today is the day. We can't think about 70 when I will not be there and nobody is answerable. What happens next generation can think. I think that's where we need to talk. We need to have 5-year short-term plan, medium-term plans and long-term plans. That is how the journey has to happen. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Vaidya, for summarizing the deliberations at U20, which happened in India's G20 presidency. So, any parting shots from the speakers? Mr. Thomas, please.
Yeah, everything has been said. I thank you for that passionate talk. Policy is not always following through with there's passion behind, but it doesn't show up in the expressions. So thank you for that. I think you're absolutely right, and I thank you also for bringing in the water cycle aspects. But we have to remember one thing, and that is that all water is local. So we cannot have a setup of regulations or policies or even measurements and data, which I 100% support you in that we need. It has to be local. Even in whatever country you have, you can have a village on one side of a hill next to another, and they have totally different conditions. You have to measure water with local understanding, but then of course you can have overarching goals and objectives, or how you want to treat your water depending on the situation. So I think we need to remember that the water is more than other things, because it's not only quality, it's only quantity, and that can fluctuate very locally. So I think that is something that I would just want to add on to this.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, great. So, yeah, I would imagine a situation where we are able to actually come up with cost-effective solutions, technologies, especially investing in natural infrastructure that can actually help address the challenges at local level. Because in aggregate, for example, we are talking about smallholder farmers, but in totality, when you put them in aggregate, they are actually the largest private sector. They are the most producers of the food that we eat, both locally and globally. And therefore, the solutions that we are thinking of, we are trying to imagine, the innovations should be centered at this category of the people. Without forgetting, of course, the youth have a huge role to play, as well as other components of the demographics, like the women and so on. Therefore, that's what I really wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vaidya?
Yeah, I just said it, but I think I'll reiterate it. We know why we want to do it, because of climate issue. We also know where it will happen, so we have all the statistics in the Kush River, mountains and everything was talked about. Nobody's talking about who is going to do it. So I think the discourse has to bring who into the picture. The person who is going to put pen to the paper has to be brought in, and his thought process has to be. So that's my one point. And second point is, if you really are serious about decarbonizing, start dejargonizing, and that's where we go, because without decarbonizing will not happen. Thank you.
Dr. Dr. Kumar?
I think we need to better understand the connections between growing enough food, meeting raising energy needs, and providing ample clean water for people around the world. Interrelations between water and connected sectors like energy, food should be taken into account to all public policies. The central element is water should be a relevant issue in the future. Actually, we are also taking this note in the coming policy of Madhya Pradesh, energy, water, food mixes. The environment must be element underlying all interrelationship. The inextricable linkages between these critical domains requires a suitably integrated approach to ensure water, food, energy, security and sustainable agriculture and energy production worldwide. However, this is not just a responsibility of industry, corporations and the government. We as individuals have an important role to play. Our everyday food, fiber, water, energy choices have a profound effect on each other's and the environment. The more we take these connections into consideration, call it transversality thinking, the better our choices will be of achieving a sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, speakers, for all your parting comments as well. So now we'll open the floor for the audience. Any questions?
Thank you so much for such,
If you can introduce yourself first.
Okay. My name is Andrew Aijuka. I'm a water journalist and I come from Uganda. I work with an organization called InfoNile. We cover stories along the Nile, particularly on water issues. I'm really glad that we are talking, on the same page. However, I don't know what it is, but everywhere I go, each pavilion I go to, I tend to ask them to always engage the media. The media is the linkage between the down people and the policymakers and the high level, people. So what we are doing at InfoNile to make sure that we get the local people engaged is that we are doing what we call taking back the stories to the communities. This is how we do it. Once we tell a story in a particular community, for example, we have been to Kasese where there are glaciers melting, that's in the Rwenzoris. And we were asking them, what do you think is causing these glaciers? Of course, they will give you the cultural aspect. They will tell you it is because maybe some people are going up the mountain and having sex from there, maybe, stuff like that. Of course, this is what they believe, but, the science behind it also. So this is when you introduce the science behind the melting glaciers, and that way you have a discussion. And last week I was in Kasese doing an exhibition and a screening on this, and at the end of the exhibition and the screening, we told them to get into discussion groups. And in these discussion groups, we were asking them, what do you commit to do, having known what is causing the glaciers to melt? And, most of them were, saying that they will plant at least a tree on their birthdays, or they will try to plant a tree whenever a child is born, so that, they can contain the melting glaciers. And I think we should bring the media to the tables like these ones to always, tell us the stories that are happening, and even the local man to, the media has the voice of the local man. Regardless of whether we can't bring a local man here, but if we have a media or a story that is relating to what the local man is saying, I think that can be very, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comment? Please be a little short because we are short of time. If you can just be precise.
I'm Dr. Punya, I'm Dr. Pradeep Punya from India. I have listened a vital portions of water and its different ingredients. I am very happy to listen such kind of policy meetings issued on this platform. But I am here talking about the grassroots level. A lot of schemes, programs have been executed in my Rajasthan, that is the northwestern part, that is known as the third area. But since we have not eliminated the problems of drinking water, a lot of quantity of water have not abolished in any thing is that how can we prepare such kind of plans which have not been through rural populations? If we have execute any kind of plans at grassroots level, we need to make some very integrated water resource plans by the help of the rural populations or ground real areas. In this context, my appeal, my request to this panelist, please provide such kind of structure that the people of the rural area, rural people involved in this context.
Thank you so much. No, that in fact India Water Foundation has been very vocal on this, that the rural communities should be involved in they should have a participatory seat at planning level, policy making level, so that because they need know their needs best. Anyway, any other question? Thank you so much. So after hearing to all the speakers, I can say that undoubtedly urgent actions in the short term and transition of systems over the longer time are required to mitigate and adapt to climate change, reduce disaster risks, prevent ecosystem degradation and loss, and build lasting resilience for societies, economies, and the environment. Holistic water governance and management approaches that consider the linkage between ecosystems from source to sea ensure convergence between international processes and foster cross-sectoral collaborations are necessary to manage changes in hydrology related to precipitation, evaporation, glacial melt, groundwater depletion, permafrost, etc. Address multiple compounding and cascading risks resulting from water-related hazards and interacting climatic and non-climatic risks that transcend sectors and geographies. A global water information system will change the game on how we prepare for the impacts of climate change, manage water resources sustainably, and build resilience. With the impacts of climate change mainly being felt through water and to an accelerating extent, we need to better understand the current status and future conditions of water resources in relation to climate change and other environmental and societal changes. Decision makers need to have reliable information to ensure water is available of sufficient quality and quantity and adequately allocated across sectors. Data and information on water as well as risk knowledge are also needed to ensure from related disasters and pollution, highlighting the benefits and co-benefits of water and water-related ecosystem management would allow for more targeted climate finance and raise awareness for the role of water for both climate mitigation and adaptation as well as resilience building. Thank you so much. I thank all my speakers and the guest pavilion for approving our this session and giving us space. Thank you so much. I also request Dr. Arvind Kumar to please present his book to all the speakers present here.